Today we are going to focus on domestic agribusiness competitiveness and the free trade agreements. We've been having discussions around the free trade agreements, their impacts on trade, and where we are at as the developing countries, and what we need to do and engage in, especially in improving our negotiation on the table when it comes to free trade agreements. But today we delve deeper and just focus on our domestic agribusiness competitiveness. So on the panel, we have Godfrey Odero, Henry Kinywa, and the lovely Lydia Wairimo Kimani. So our first presentation comes from Godfrey Odero. Godfrey Odero is a public and policy international trade specialist. He's a senior trade development officer with the Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development. He has vast expertise and training on non-tariff measures to trade, including sanitary and phytosanitary measures, SPS, technical barriers to trade, that's TBTs, as well as provision of advisory professional services to medium, small, and micro enterprises in Kenya and Uganda. He holds a BA in economics from Moi University. So we'll welcome Godfrey Odero. And as he loads his presentation, would like to give a special thanks to the Society of Crop Agribusiness Advisors for hosting this webinar, and also for the people behind the preparation of this webinar, the team secretariat at SOCA, and also great help from Angela Limo and Lillian Wanjirombudia. So welcome, Godfrey.
Thank you. Just for the interest of clarity, my name is Jeffrey, actually. Jeffrey. Odero Jeffrey. All right, so I requested, okay, I can see it's being shared. Great, thank you. Okay, so thank you once again for the opportunity. I cannot see Ricky. Are we expecting him, or we should just proceed?
Please, let's proceed.
Okay, no problem. Great. So my presentation will be brief. We're looking at domestic and international competitiveness for agribusiness. This is an area that most of us probably have an idea or know what it is. So it's more of a general topic, but it's always good to have an insight from different perspectives. So I'll request that whoever is handling the screen, is it Lydia? Kindly proceed to the next slide, please. Okay, so domestic competitiveness in our agribusiness sector. I looked at our domestic competitiveness in this angle. We're looking at the factors of production. If you want to be if you want to be competitive, it all begins at the production level. And then we look at availability of extension services. Do we have them? Are they enough? Are they up to speed with the times we are living it? We are living it, the production environment, the global economy, the new challenges, the enabling environment. That's where the government comes in. Even before we go to government support and incentives, you look at the enabling environment. And this has been a major debate, and I'll be looking into that in maybe a minute or two. We also look at quality infrastructure. This covers the laboratories, the processing facilities, and all that. Value addition. You need, if you need quality, there are some investment that you have to make in infrastructure. And then this is a common one. Transport infrastructure network. This has been mentioned in many papers. You hear there is a surplus of produce, say in Muranga. There's scarcity in, say, Eldoret. The reason being they cannot be moved from the farm because of transport network. And then market linkages. So let's proceed. Factors of production, land. Do we have arable land? How much of it is in use? How much idle land do we have in the country that is productive, but somehow we have the ghost landlords or absentee landlords? I remember during the Kibaki regime, there was a debate, a huge debate about this when Orengo was land minister, and there was a threat that absentee landlords would be, their titles would be taken away. I've traveled in this country. There's so many places with so much arable land, but it's not in use because someone owns more than they need and they're not using it. They're not allowing it to be leased and so on and so forth. So for us to be productive, we have to convert as much as possible of our arable land into use. We look at labor supply. Today, the aspect of labor has changed with mechanization in agriculture. Labor in our old communities, you needed to have as many children as possible, to provide your farm with enough labor. Today, the labor we are talking about is skilled labor. Even if it's agricultural, there has to be some skills at certain level. You know when to plant, how to prune, how to do this and that. So that's the kind of labor we're talking about. We're just not just looking at someone who can till the land, but someone who can do it in appropriate manner. We're looking at water. Water is a key resource in agribusiness. Do we have safe water? It's not safe enough to just say that because you have access to a river or a lake that you can just pump that water to your farm. How safe is that water? That is from the river with the pollutions that is in town, with industrialization and all that, and poor hygienic conditions even in the villages. When so many places we still suffer, we don't with abject poverty. There are no lavatories, so when it rains, it floods, and all that water goes to the rivers, to the lakes. So yes, we have access to water, but it's not safe for agribusiness to be competitive. And this normally comes up later, way too late to be corrected when you are testing, also when you're doing exports, when you have like heavy metals in your produce or chemical residues that are beyond allowable limits. So that becomes an issue. Another factor that we need to look at is the inputs in agricultural production. Looking at the seeds, propagation materials, etc., such as also not propagation, but even fertilizers. Even fertilizers also key inputs, seeds, propagation material. Research and development, I'll mention that later on, as it kind of covers, it's cross-cutting on all those issues. And then we go to pest control, the elephant in the room. And finally, technology. With modern technology, it's easier to even use a small parcel of arable land to produce so much that can make us productive. Let's proceed to the next slide, please. Extension services. Key in this, when I talk about competitiveness, we're looking at risk management, risk mitigation, risk assessment, risk analysis, risk communication, and all that. We need extension service providers who are well versed in food safety issues, who are well versed in good agricultural practices, who have an understanding of the HACCP system. Let's proceed. Now to the government factor, another elephant in the room. Unfortunately, I work for the government. So for us to be competitive, just like in other countries, in developed world, actually, the government actually plays a big role in agricultural sector development. For instance, if you look at the US and EU, in particular the US enjoys those domestic subsidies of about over 30% in government support. Okay, in our country, we just want to support infrastructure. You are building roads to enable imports into Kenya, railway to enable imports. If we don't finance our agriculture, then we're cheating ourselves. Enabling regulatory environment, I cannot say enough about this. We have so many laws and they're being made every day. Someone just wakes up and thinks there's a problem. The only way to address this, let's make a new law, let's make a new regulation. So it's stifling business environment, it's stifling agribusiness, and it's a great concern from where we sit at the State Department for Trade. Later on, if given a chance, I may tell you whatever we are doing to address that, and though I must admit it's not enough so far. Quality infrastructure, again, these ones are heavy investments, like the laboratories, the reference laboratories, like the ones we have at KEBS and KEFIS, at DVS, and I believe AF also have some labs right now. Transport infrastructure, that is normal. Incentives, there should be incentives to big or smallholder farmers who aggregate. These incentives could be in form of land rates, waivers at the counties, and so on and so forth, to enable these businesses to thrive. And then market linkages. The aspect of distribution. The government has the biggest network in the country. If you look, for instance, at the postal service, they used to reach out to the most remote of villages or primary schools. Okay, let's use the postal service first. They reach the most remote of villages. The government has primary schools, again in the most remote of villages. So these are some of the synergies that if we tap into can help in creating the market linkages. There's always the contact. You move a truck from, let's say, somewhere in Nyahururu and it's going up to Turkana. There's some school where it can stop and people can come even once a weekly to get if it's vegetables or if it's grains or whatever it is. So market linkages, the government has a role to do that to enhance our domestic competitiveness. Let's proceed. Okay, so thank you. So just to wind up on the aspect of domestic competitiveness, as I said, this is an area we are well versed in. Just you may just need to hear a different voice, but these are common knowledge. Maybe not common to everyone, but those are actually, in my view, the key aspects that if well, championed or if well organized in a synergetic manner, can enhance our competitiveness domestically. So now, I wanted to mention this issue of the counties before I move to international competitiveness. Counties, the elephant in the room, the levies, the taxes, and etc. They're becoming too much. And one of the challenges that we noticed as a State Department for Trade, right now I'm in the Trade Policy Division, is that when domestic trade was moved to the counties in the 2010 Constitution, just scroll back, please. In the 2010 Constitution, the counties or the municipalities by then, their focus as regards trade was collection of levies, sales, business permit, and so on and so forth. So there's little really, if any, that they do to promote trade or to promote agribusiness whatsoever. So in my view, and in view of many people, there is a need for serious advocacy to do the elimination of county trade policy from its fiscal policy. So trade should not be just viewed as a means of enabling the county to raise resources, to raise money, to pay wages and all that, while they're not doing anything to support trade. They're not doing anything significant to support agribusiness. So on this, I'll also link it with the bullet on value for money. I used to have a business in Machakos County, and I was paying a business permit every year. You pay for outdoor advertising, but the county was doing literally nothing. There's no access road. It is a new estate that people have just built. They only come to harass people to get the leave, but there's absolutely nothing in return that is supporting whatever business you're doing there. So this is an item that also has to be demanded from the private sector. They want permits, they want the sales and all that, but what are you getting in return? Through the unions, through the BMOs, the private sector will need to stand up to this so that there's value for money. Yes, we'll pay for the permits, but then what? Why am I paying for permit when there is nothing at all you're doing to facilitate my business? Another issue is the levies that are across countries. There's the multiplicity of taxation. If you're moving, for instance, today you're moving fish from Homa Bay to Nairobi. When you get to Kisumu, you'll pay a levy. When you cross Kisumu to Kericho, you'll pay. Kericho, Nakuru, you'll pay again. Nakuru, Kiambu, you'll pay. Kiambu, Nairobi, you'll pay. Imagine that. Now, suppose you are doing agribusiness and you have a vehicle, it is branded, it has the name of your company, the things you're doing. So you're moving, you don't even have the products, you're just, moving to maybe, let's say, Kakamega, going to get maybe avocado. Just by branding your vehicle, every county you pass by, they'll require you to pay outdoor advertising fees. Okay. The same was told in Nairobi, it's about 43,000 per year. And my queue, you don't operate there daily. So those are the kind of challenges we are facing, and they're really, detrimental to our competitiveness. So going forward, we'll need to look at one, business-friendly laws, relaxation of unnecessary red tapes, and then two, harmonization of levies within the local economies, that is inter-counties. So right now, I'm pleased to report that we are working on a paper. It actually should be a policy document that should be adopted, so that guidelines for harmonization of taxes and levies by the counties. Okay, I know it will face a lot of opposition. Actually, it has faced, because the program started last year, and so far it's still stuck. We hope for the best, but it's necessary. There's need to be a harmonized guideline on how these counties should operate. So I'll pause there and request if there's any question or comment before I proceed to international competitiveness. Thank you.
I think, Geoffrey, we can proceed. We'll take the questions at the end, and also we can get more questions in the chat box as we move on. Then we'll take them at the end of all the presentations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. On international competitiveness, I think the presentation is very brief there. Oh, maybe not so brief. Okay, so international competitiveness. Again, we have to go back to the production level. And here, the focus now will be on total volumes. What are we able to produce? Anyone who's ever tried, and I believe a number of us have, or presently doing, to trade in goods that required large volumes. For instance, you need to fill a container. It's not easy. You may get the goods, but they are not of the quality. Okay, you may get the quantity, but it's not up to. So just filling one container alone is not easy. And for you to be competitive globally or in the international market, you have to be consistent. So you have to be assured of, your supply chain. You know that every month I should be able to deliver. If it's 40 tons, you have to deliver that. If you don't, your buyer abroad will seek an alternative, because the demands there are very high. And remember, in Europe and US and some parts of Asia, the seasons are very harsh. So if winter is coming and they do not get the products early enough, let's say a month before, it becomes very hard for them to supply their clients. So they're normally very strict on whoever they're giving the contract to supply them. They need assurance that you can deliver the quantities, the volumes, and of quality they need. A second aspect on value on competitiveness will be now on value addition. I know in agribusiness, it cannot always be possible to add value on everything. For instance, on fresh produce, some people, they just want it fresh the way it is, but where possible, we should focus on value addition. And also value addition has many dynamics. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to change the product. It can be even just how you present it, okay, how you package it. Right. Then I'll go to compliance. That is now brings us now to sanitary and phytosanitary measures for international competitiveness. This is one area there's never, or there's hardly any compromise on that. If you cannot meet their safety standards on the produce they need, unfortunately you'll be at a loss, because whatever you send there, they'll tell you destroy or send back at your own cost, return to sender at the sender's cost, and it's normally very costly and painful. So the issue of compliance, I've written compliance star MARS. Oh, sorry, apology for that. That is not even an accepted abbreviation. That is mine. That's why I put an asterisk there. So market access requirements. That's what I meant. MARS, market access requirements. So compliance with market access requirements is very key. Issues like maximum residue limits, pest-free. Some countries will insist that they have to prove that the area or the locality where these goods are coming from are declared pest-free. Some will insist that they want certain treatments at point of exit, like fumigation or heat treatment before the products are ferried abroad. And then finally, there's an emerging issue, that is adoption of sustainability standards. We may need a special session on this, So besides SPS and TBT, besides SPS and TBT, which remember are normally enforced by the government, there's the emergence of adoption of sustainability standards, and these ones are now being brought about by the industry. You know, like the Union of Supermarkets in the UK or the EU or the US, they are saying if your production system or your value chain system does not value one, human rights, okay? If you're using child labor, if you're abusing worker, you all can remember the case, and I don't, my statement should not be quoted. The issue of Kakuzi, the human rights issues, and at some point it was going to create a serious stalemate. They could not export abroad. Okay, so these sustainability standards, they're looking at environmental safety and all that. How do you use land? How do you get rid of your industrial waste and so on and so forth? So that is a key area, and we need to focus on this. So remember, SPS and TBT are enforced by the government, but the issue of sustainability is now industry-led. And you know, if Turkey's market are saying we cannot accept this, there's nothing the government will tell them. You know, the government cannot force them to buy from you. If they say this is the standard, it has to be that. So to enhance our competitiveness, we have to pay key attention on this. Let's proceed. Government support, yes, very necessary. One, negotiations for market access. Of course, you cannot just take your goods to any country that you're not resident in. They have to be, the government has to lead you there. And we've been trying to do negotiations with many countries. Actually, our desks are full now. So yes, that is unnecessary. Yes. Move next, please. Next slide. Oh, sorry. I'm looking at a different screen. So no, okay, sorry. Yes. So negotiations for market access, one, and then two, international cooperation. Remember, in the SPS agreement, if a country sets a new standard or a new measure, if it's a developed country, it is obliged, or its obligation to support a least developed or a developing country to meet those requirements. So yes, government role in support here is to ensure there's international cooperation and technical assistance that we gain from our trading partners. Also, there's the aspect of commercial representation abroad. If we have counselors in our embassies, they are the ones who are supposed to feed us with market intelligence information, what is needed here, there's a market opportunity for this and that, what do they require, what are the standards, and so forth. And so if you don't have commercial representation abroad, like right now, I think the number has actually gone down because of budgetary constraints. It becomes a challenge to be competitive globally. Let me give you an example of US. US trades very little agricultural produce with Kenya, but we have USDA, Foreign Agricultural Service, full house in Nairobi. They have agricultural attaché, they have agricultural counselor, they have agricultural technical officers here. So yes, they're superpowers. We cannot be able to, copy everything they do, but we just need to learn from them. Imagine they're here doing that, and yet we're the ones who hold competitive advantage in, sending some of these agricultural produce to their market. So we also need to send our people there to feed us with information. Cold storage facilities, this is necessary. Again, I mentioned these are huge investments, and they normally require government support. Finally, financing and insurance, that is EXIM, Import-Export Bank, or credit guarantee schemes. Ever wondered why Chinese firms are doing so well in Africa or in other countries? Because for them, once they win a contract for infrastructure, they don't wait for payment. So long as they won the contract, okay, it's an internationally recognized contract. They go to the Chinese Exim Bank, and they have a number of them, okay, and then they're given at least 30% value of that contract. So they'll come to Kenya, they'll set up their premises, they'll import equipment, and they'll even start working with the 10%. They'll even do 10% of the job before they even get any voted from the government. So that kind of support, we need it from our government for us to remain competitive. And an example of this is if a company, let's say Soccer today, or a member of Soccer gets a contract to supply maybe 1,000 metric tons of avocados or fresh or vegetables, okay? Is there somewhere this person can go and get 1 billion Kenya shillings so that within a month is able to mobilize, run through the country and get 100 or 100 or 200 containers ready, for shipment. So we need that kind of support for us to compete globally. Let's proceed. Another aspect that comes into for competitiveness is the issue of trade facilitation. This is again part of what we should expect from government, but I won't call it government support because this is actually no longer an issue of support. This is an obligation. Remember, Kenya signed and ratified the World Trade Organization Trade Facilitation Agreement in 2017. So it's now the obligation of the government to ensure that trade moves as smoothly as possible. So one of the issues where the government can help here is on transportation costs. The government should spearhead negotiations with foreign countries on issues of aviation, freight charges, and all that. Ease of documentation requirements, enhanced use of e-certification, and also work on institutional frameworks at the border points. Okay, you want to export, how many agencies do you have to go through? You want to import maybe a key input that you'll be using in your agribusiness. How many agencies do you have to go through? So that institutional framework at the border points is very key. It has to be streamlined as much as possible. Finally, this one is the tough one. Sorry, just scroll back. Yes, the second last bullet, I left it to be the last intentionally. Addressing the political economy aspects between countries. Political economy. Remember, we're talking about trade facilitation, we're talking about this and that. But if there's no political goodwill, like you saw what was happening with Tanzania, again, I'm not supposed to be quoted, remember, I'm a government officer. So there's some things that we have done since 2018 through bilateral discussions, through joint technical commissions, through joint, trade committees and all that. And even at the EAC level, everything on paper was resolved, okay? But now the political economy. So it's upon the government also as an aspect of trade facilitation. Remember, there's a new domain called the political economics of trade facilitation. So you have to understand the body politic of whoever trading partner you have. A clear example would be, look at the US-China relationship during the Obama administration. Contrast it with the relationship during the Trump administration. And then now look at what is expected with the Biden administration. So this is an area that we normally underlook, but it's very key, the issue of political economy. So those are one of the areas we need to look at if we are to be competitive in our agribusiness at the international level. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your time. I submit.
Thank you so much, Geoffrey, for the presentation and also stating the facts for us. And I think what is key is what you've just summarized at the end about the political economy and what binds us as different countries, especially at the level of trade. And I think there are some questions that will come around the political economy and the agrarian question around how we are going to evolve in terms of agricultural trade and also even just the other trade. So our next presenter or discussant is Henry Kinyua. Henry is the current head of Digital Green and also the chairman at New KPCU. He has expertise in agribusiness and economic development, trade and government delivery, delivery professional. His vast experience in agri-value chain, analysis management, project management, public sector in government, delivery system, agribusiness strategy, culture and business strategy, market linkages, and organization development has really made an impact in the agricultural industry. So he's going to take us through agribusiness levies and taxation requirements at the county level and how this impacts on the competitiveness of especially agricultural goods. Welcome, Henry.
Thank you very much, team. Unlike Geoffrey, I don't have a presentation, but I go through my pretty brief presentation. And I think, as he said, it's very, very interesting. I was laughing as he said that counties or the even the municipals really did nothing from to support agribusiness, but demanded more from it. It's actually milking where they didn't feed. They don't feed, and it doesn't. Not much has changed though. May have some some improvement in some counties, but largely you don't have a lot of support towards agribusiness, and therefore it is important. As you saw, in fact, you saw last week, there was in the media, this apple grower in Laikipia, somewhere in Laikipia, who have been, across hosting all manner of people from, fellow farmers to politicians to everybody, just to see how he's been successful in growing apple. I think that it's been for the last 5 years, even more. And all along, sometime is that he didn't know, or as he claimed, that he was supposed to pay some levies to the counties. And therefore, for me, what I would like is the point here is like, if you are an agribusiness in any county, it is actually your responsibility to understand the levies that are charged in that county, and some can actually be as as outrageous as you may not even imagine, and it is therefore your responsibility. And how do you know? How do you really get to know this? Most of it, the licensing department. But before you get to the licensing department, this is somewhere that people actually ignore, and this is what they call the finance bill. Finance bill at the county level, even at the national level. Finance bill is such a powerful tool that county treasuries use to pass quite a number of laws and regulations that guide them or support them to collect levies. What I mean is that as per the Kenyan Constitution 2010, any legal framework or law has to go through public participation. And quite a number of them, county, you find some of these things are hidden there simply because quite a number of people, whether individually or collective as association, they don't they don't attend these public participation. And therefore, you know that counties are under pressure, from even to generate their own income. What you call the internal income generation. There's actually a percentage. Before, I think it's only this, for the previous formula of sharing the revenue. It had actually had a small incentive that the county that should produce more was to get. I think they share about 2% of the revenue they share among that. So there was a serious incentive for the counties to collect as much levies as possible. But what that means is that you'll find it is a farm. They define a farm as a production. The definition is largely at the county treasury. And therefore, the county treasury, normally how it happens, I think what I saw happen when I was at the county, was city of the county, is the treasury. We come up with all manner of levies that they like to, they like to charge, all manner of ways they like to collect revenue for the county, and therefore it's presented now to the county. The committees, or rather which is no more like the county cabinet, and the departments now discuss, the back and forth and say, now this one can kill. I remember this can kill. So the departments actually prevent their effort and say, and what is so, some of the departments are progressive enough that they develop their own pursue public participation with the industry stakeholders and say, this is what do you think? They give feedback at that level, and then from there it's as the county executive, they present, that is put to the bill, that is now public participation, then present to the county assemblies, and the county assembly also are obliged by law to also do the same to public participation before it can be passed into law. But then what you find that people who are will be targeted. I mean, everybody will be targeted, because even if you don't have a business, starting a business today, the Kenyan spirit, you might find yourself tomorrow you're in business, and therefore people don't attend these. And then you get, and counties are quite ruthless when it comes to collection. If you want to just test, go anywhere and park your vehicle, even in Turkana, just go park your vehicle in the middle of the city. You may not even know the name of the governor, but I tell you for sure, you will know how the tax is collected there. So counties are pretty ruthless. The guys in the revenue collection or enforcement are not normally like the most friendly guys, and they have to avoid all these things. Is understand that, understand what levies are being charged way before you even go and pay, and therefore what happens that, and that's why it helps to have association, whether it's the chambers of commerce or different associations, and I think that's where like soccer can actually. I know we have been very much before. Soccer was more from a science, a technical operation side, and I think this is time we now, as we go forward, to be looking at, to be producing most of these budgets, whether at county of the national level, and look at this finance policy. Is this so that we can present a joint on behalf of farmers, because not everybody, not farmers will be, but I think as an organization, we have a responsibility for this country and for the behalf of the industry to present as we can now go have a counter to the industry. Say, by the way, it's okay for the county, you charging this, okay, but the implication may be different, because you may charge this at quite a number of people if you kill all these businesses, and the people can see that, because the guys at the treasury, the pressure is, collect as much revenue, and therefore they look at different, but sometimes they don't necessarily understand the technical side, or even some of the implication that might be. Most of them, I've said, they don't even see to really analyze to that level, and therefore that's why when the bill is shared, we can pick a couple of counties, because normally you find they are all the same. If the video is shared, then you can now do the public participation and shout about it, put it in the media and say, hey, counties, we are responding to this finance bill from county this, and we feel if we charge levy this and this is likely to kill this and is likely to reduce your overall revenue collection. So I think that's what I feel going forward, is that the levies, the importance of looking at our contribution, participating in development of the finance bills of those counties, and then because the moment it has been passed at the county level, there is nothing you can. The only thing you can do is to pay or close your business. And if you think the guys at revenue collection, you don't care whether you close your business, clearly they will not, because their brief is very specific. Go collect, and the guys who are not collected, take them in. So it is to avoid that dogo for yourself is, please, let's see and just understand it's at the finance bill where they have an opportunity to actually engage. And I've seen, I saw nearly that I think there was some levies, I think they were to be passed on the meat and something inspection, and we negotiated. There was and I think until they were reduced. So it's during the preparation, there's an opportunity to discuss and even remove some or have them reduced. But if we don't get participate at that stage, for the whole of that year, the only thing you can do is to pay or close your business. And therefore, to ensure that you stay in business, stay competitive, it is therefore individual responsibility, but collective. And this way of saying, like soccer, we can. And I think now going forward, until Wambugu, that farmer was taken in, and he genuinely didn't know. The way he said, he genuinely didn't know until I told the guy he pulled the finance bill. Clearly, it was there in the finance bill. So the county had already done their part in passing the finance bill, and the person who had not paid, they were coming to enforce. So I think the idea is just we can once it's been that, because once it is in the bill, whether it is punitive or not, that is for the next year's conversation. But for now, the thing is pay or close your business. So I think in short, what I'm saying is that once you get to start business in a certain county, before you start, kindly understand all the levies are charged. You can either go to check that, either get from the license department, or just get the finance bill. It's always a public document. And then even when you're in business, every year when the budget, the finance bill before June, they read make sure you have already contributed and voiced. And where possible, it is good for association to go together. I'll stop there, then I can pick any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Henry, for the overview of how these bills are made and why we need to participate in such bills to ensure that we are also being heard as farmers or even the people on the ground. And that also just brings in a question: do we have the right people seated at the county level who can actually assess the impact that these levies have overall in terms of agriculture, in terms of the food price, I'm just reading from the trading economics that our food inflation is at around 5.6. So what are we doing to reduce this inflation? As we ponder about that, let's take our next presenter or our rapporteur for today, Lydia Wairimo Kimani. She's an agricultural economist with 12 years of cumulative experience in the agricultural sector in Kenya, currently serving as the SPS focal point at the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. That's the Agricultural Sector Network, ASNET, and also KEPSA, and represents the private sector at National SPS Committee. In addition, she's working as the Agribusiness Liaison, in the Agribusiness Liaison, the docket at Society for Crop Agribusiness Advisors of Kenya, and represents this organization in agriculture, devolution, and environmental sector boards of KEPSA. She has previously served as the vice chairperson at the African Women in Agribusiness Network, that's AWAN, and represented also in the sectors of agriculture, devolution, planning, and gender development sector at KEPSA. So welcome, Lydia, and please give us just what you feel about this whole discussion today.
Okay, thank you very much, Nekesa. And maybe mine is to very briefly reflect on what Geoffrey shared and in the context of the conversation of free trade agreements. So in light of domestic competitiveness, my areas of focus, I wanted to look at the chapters that mostly are going to feature prominently and where domestic investors compete strongly with the foreign investors. This is the chapter on a chapter called the state-owned enterprises, the good regulatory practices, and the investment chapter. These I'm just borrowing from the negotiating objectives that are shared by the US, the American government. And I will talk about this in light of what Geoffrey has shared. So you find that in the space of domestic competitiveness, in a country like us, we have a lot of developing countries such as Kenya will tend to generally give preference to foreign direct investors, because there has been what has been said that when there are huge FDI inflows, foreign direct investment into a country, then this by extension comes with the creation of jobs, the increase of competitiveness, setting up of industries. But when you evaluate, and I think we have shared this from previous webinars, that is a questionable thing. So, and this was also highlighted by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development Agency, UNCTAD, in 2016, when they had a forum in Nairobi, that governments should be keen on, should watch out and should not be so quick to offer extensive incentives to foreign direct investors at the expense of domestic investors. So to narrow it down to the conversation of today on taxes and levies, you will find that for a lot of FDI or a lot of foreign investors, in some instances, they may not be affected as such by these kinds of, for lack of a better word, as in the rampant imposition of taxes and levies by county governments in a bid to raise revenue. And this is because one of the things that when a foreign direct investor is coming into a country, we even have an agency now, a government agency, the Kenya Investment Authority, that is set to, in a bid to attract them, they have incentives such as setting up at the export processing zones, getting preferential treatment in terms of setting up their enterprises. While you see that we have gone out of our way to facilitate foreign direct investors, the same is not replicated for our domestic investors. So you find that that differentiated treatment for the two classes of investors now by itself is gives one competitive advantage. So this is something that we need to look into. And one of the things that is really crippling our domestic investors is this kind of treatment. So we need to really ask ourselves, when we treat our very own like this, and they're the ones that will remain in times of pandemic, they have remained. We have seen in a case of China, when it was initially announced, there was a lot of capital flight, and there was a lot of investors left China. And that is not any different. So we need to also look and be very keen on supporting our very own, because in times of economic, climatic, even health shocks like we're experiencing right now, we find ourselves as in left to fend for our own and bootstrap and support our very own now. So these are some of the things that we need to look into. And going into the FTAs, we need to find out, are we going out on a limb to encourage foreign direct investors at the expense of our domestic ones? Then again, just like I think Kinyua has mentioned, that this now brings in the role of soccer. How are we supporting, for example, our domestic investors, in this case being the smallholder farmers, to understand some of these regulatory implications on their businesses? Remember, we have always said that the challenge that domestic smallholder farmers operate individually brings an extensive administration cost to these advisory services. So again, I'll reiterate that once they are organized into cooperatives that can hire expertise who can now work in collaboration with soccer, we make the access of this kind of information very easy, and also get them to be included and have their voices heard in advocacy spaces, and have the laws of the land working in their favor. The other one is the state-owned enterprises. So Joseph, apologies, Odero brought it out very clearly that in the example that used of China, our state-owned enterprises ideally are supposed to stimulate that kind of business for at a domestic level. But you find that a lot of them are going into collapse. So you realize that for China, the state-owned enterprises are very well run, and they are actually responsible for the success that they have witnessed to rising to their position of being a global economic power. So we need to look into areas of how can our state-owned enterprises be revamped, especially those in agriculture, to support the functions and the profitability of the smallholder enterprise. Then finally, I'd like to look at the investment chapter, the good regulatory practices. So if you have when we have time, we'd look at the objectives. The one on good regulatory practices, especially for the US FTA, was very clear in stating that the US businesses will enjoy preferential treatment in Kenya, and we went ahead to exclusively say that the Kenyan investors in the US are not entitled to enjoy the same kind of benefits. So you already see a disproportionate treatment of investors in the same country and where our domestic investors are in their home country. So this is in addition to some of the other benefits and advantages an investment chapter in an FTA also extends to foreign investors. So these are some of the things that we need to carefully look at. And then after that, I'd just like to also let us think through the issues of around the political economy. We also need to look into, as business people, how is corruption affecting our businesses? How is the illicit financial flows affecting our businesses? Last year alone, you said that Africa lost $80 billion, and Africa only receives $50 billion, according to the UNCTAD report, in aid. So you already see there's a disparity between what we are losing and what we receive in aid. So perhaps if we start stemming some of these illicit financial flows, and for the agriculture sector would be mainly in the export of agriculture produce. So a lot of times you have multinationals declaring losses perennially, which begs the question, then how is it that they are able to continue functioning? There's also the capital, once the investors have already made full use of our resources, all that money that is made is stored, is deposited in their home countries. So ultimately, we tend to lose on both ends. So we tend to get the short end of the stick. These are some of the things that we will need to address. And finally, the issue of that lack of information that we are supposed, public as in installation of levies and these kinds of taxes is supposed to be an inclusive process where there is public participation. So to what extent are we taking the initiative to bring this information to those people who need it most? So thank you very much. And I also wish to appreciate the previous presenters for their good presentations. Thank you, Nekesa.
Thank you so much, Lydia, for that good wrap up, and just looking at the overview of the agreements and also the impact on trade. And I think you also bring in a very good point in terms of the political economy and the agrarian question, which is quite so much linked to the industrialization. How do we then know that we're actually creating more jobs and yet some are losing the jobs? So what exactly is happening in that space? Are we growing or not? But again, as I said, let's go into the Q&A session. And if you have any questions, please continue putting them on the chat board. And we have one comment from Peter Mwangi who says, in as much as the county governments want to make money, this could be counterproductive. And he likes the way Henry Kinyua has put across the approach of bodies joining together to fight these oppressive decisions early enough. So that's a comment from Peter Mwangi. And just going into the questions, we have a few minutes left, but we'll try and point out different questions to different panelists and discussants for today. So the first question goes to Mr. Odero. And this when you're talking about the factors of production and where the government's role comes in terms of proper infrastructure, and you also gave us a case study of where you were and the roads were not done, there was no, access roads. Who exactly, apart from just the business, the private sector, because at the end of the day, if I'm a private sector, my work is to make money. I need the government to put in place all these measures to ensure that my business is running. If you compare to countries like Zambia, where they're opening up farming blocks, they go there, make roads, put in electricity, water, and invite investors to go into these particular areas. What are we doing in Kenya? In as much as we are saying we need to be proactive, but how can I be proactive when I'm busy concentrating on my startup? My startup needs my time. How do you strike that balance between lobbying and also lobbying for the utilization of the funds that you are paying as a business versus doing your own business? So that's something I would like you to address. And also, when we are planning as a country, why don't we plan first before the implementation? And who exactly is supposed to really put these measures in place? Yeah. Then the other question would be, as maybe in government, the documents that are available in terms of the policies, the regulations. I know maybe this one can be addressed also by Henry, but are these accessible to the normal, the common farmer? Can they just go on Google and access these documents? In other countries, they're accessing them. I just accessed a document about a study by USDA, and it's good that you also mentioned that USDA has an office here. They have a full paper in terms of free trade agreements between themselves and other countries, the impact of these free trade agreements and what they can do as a country and what policies are there. Are these accessible to the common farmer who doesn't know about all these things in a language that they can understand? Whose role is it to ensure that this farmer is able to have this capacity building? Maybe you can take that before we proceed.
Thank you, Ms. Nekesa, for the question. On factors of production, when I was still in high school, there used to be something, I'd see it in fiscal papers, something called rural access roads. I don't know whether it's still there. I know nowadays when they announce the annual budget, I only look at the one for State Department for Trade and for obvious reasons. Anyway, yes, so there used to be something about it called rural access roads. It was in policy, so every year the government is supposed to allocate something, some budgetary financing for making those rural access roads to enable reach to the farmlands in various areas. So this is an issue that was supposed to be taken up by the Ministry of Agriculture, the Policy Department of Agriculture. So it is their role. And then secondly, that's one of the reasons why we have the legislative wing of our country. They're supposed to do oversight. Okay, they know the needs of their people. They need access road and all that. So every year when we have these budgets, the national budgets or even the county budgets, it's the representative who should speak for the people. So as a business person, your role would be or as an association, as an individual, it may be difficult as an association to, hire maybe some people to work on your advocacy issues, so to liaise with the local representatives, so that when those budgets are proposed or those bills are proposed, you look for what is in it for me as a trader or as an agribusiness person. Okay, we need an access road, we need water, we need dams. Has it been captured anywhere? So it may be difficult for a startup, as you've said, balancing, you're looking for finance. When you're starting a business, you're the manager, you're the sweeper, you're everything. So it becomes difficult. So I agree with you. There's need for support there, and that is where we need to, strengthen our linkages with the legislative wing, so that they're actually supposed to be doing that on the behalf of the people. Thank you. And you're asking about the agricultural policy. Yes, the policy documents are available in most websites. Even if you check the website for trade.go.ke, you'll get the ESC agreement, the ESC Common Market Protocol, the COMESA. They're available. However, to smallholder farmers, they may not have the capacity to digest or even the time to go through the whole document. So that's again where associations or even non-governmental organizations come in. They may help, to repackage the message in a manner that can easily be interpreted by the common man.
Yeah.
Documentation is there, and you asked about planning. Kenya has one of the best plans in the planet. I had the privilege of serving at the State Department for Planning, National Planning, that is in 2013 and 2014. I was working for the government, but I was actually not employed by the government then. It was through a Swedish agency. So we have very great master plans. The problem comes with implementation, the politics of our times. You have a plan, everyone wants a kickback, everyone wants, so at the end of the day, the plan is diluted at implementation level. So to address this, the government came up with the National Integrated Monitoring and Evaluation System, NIMES, or NIMS, sometime in 2013, I believe. No, actually, it began in 2004 with the NAC government, NAC regime. That was President Kibaki and the Nyong'o of his time. So this was supposed to track monitoring and evaluating every project that the government undertakes. And it's actually taken root. It's now domesticated in all government departments. Unfortunately, if you look at the reports annually, they normally fall short of what was planned for. So again, the challenge is on implementation, not planning per se. Actually, we are very good planners. So I'll submit at this point. Thank you.
Maybe Henry, you can take the next one about just making this available in terms of the policy briefs. Do we have policy briefs that can actually summarize some of these policies to smallholder farmers? I remember once I was told, if you're writing a thesis and it drops somewhere or even a page of a thesis and it's dropped somewhere and somebody picks it up, will they be able to understand it? So are we able to digest these policies for smallholder farmers to the level which they can understand in form of policy briefs? And the same also, maybe as you take that one, I would like you to address the issues of the cess, each county having its own cess. I know you've talked about it, but how do we as a country, we have one policy, maybe we have a regional policy, we have, okay, first we subscribe to the WTO, then we subscribe to our regional policies, maybe the EAC, then we have our own local policies that are eating us up. We are eating ourselves internally, yet supporting the regional trade. How do we go about that?
I think a good point. First is documents are accessible. You can get to the county, just pull from the county website. I think not even smallholder farmers. With regard to whether they can be or they are understandable smallholder farmers, actually not even smallholder farmers or small traders. Even many professionals, even for many guys who are in this cannot sometimes are not able to understand, because it's not just a matter of reading, getting the English and the grammar from it. Is it actually understands the implications of such a move? Suppose somebody now that increases, if like you say, what would be the implication? What would be now the overall impact to the tax? To the tax revenue collection. If we increase levies on seeds, suppose we increase levies on seeds or on the finished product. What exactly? What if you now even the seed, then maybe like the top quality seed, you levy like 10 times. That make sure that that now it becomes too expensive for majority of the people. What that means is that you'll never collect anything because there will be no fresh produce. But that kind of an analysis need to be done by professionals, and that's where a body like this can actually, on behalf of farmers, and that's so important. The association with the time now, where if we can, where farmer organizations, the cooperatives are strong enough, they can actually be able to look at that. Or alternatively, as I was saying, just use the offices of the representative. I think we give our representative, the MP, the MC, we give them an easy time, give them a through pass in terms of these things. That's something you should do. And the representative farmers say, hey, we feel that what are we doing based on what is coming, what is there, how are our issues addressed. So I think whether the policy believes that exist, I can tell you for sure they don't, and therefore that's a vacuum. It's an opportunity for how we can look at it, and for somebody to really come in and just have very brief, particularly explanation on the existing policy and how they can be addressed. With regard to harmonizing the policy, I think there's need to engage the Council of Governors. I think at that level, it brings in a bit of, but it will be, as you're saying, it will definitely be, it's a long shot. It's a hell of a long shot, because counties also, they will say they have a right to collect revenue. I remember there's a time it was addressed, and I think now, I'm not sure, I haven't followed up, but it was like, if you pay, if you're paid cess in Nyeri, that is, then you are not supposed to pay you're not, because if you are collecting produce from like a place like Endarasha in Kenya, you'll have to pay in Nyeri. Then you can, if you are not, then you actually pass. If you pay, let's say, even you pass Nyeri County, you pass Kirinyaga County, you should pass Murang'a County, Kiambu County, and then Nairobi. So there was initially, as long as you can demonstrate that you have paid it in Nyeri, you are not supposed to, you could not be charged in all the, you only maybe come to pay like in Nairobi in the market. Because if you're going to the market, that's totally a different, arrangement. I know that one, I know to what lex whether it still exists, but I remember there's a time that had been negotiated, that was in place. I haven't followed up, and I think we need to have more of those, coming in place, whereby if so that we don't make it very difficult. But I think to harmonize, so that's one way of harmonize. But to harmonize in terms of how much of it is paid, what is charged, and what does not, that I think can be tried at the Council of Governors. But there's a long shot. However, as I say, this like freedom. It's never given. Freedom is never given. It's taken, and therefore people have to, lobby quite strongly. And that is where the finance bill, I repeat, is a key position that people can actually lobby and insist. For us as this county, we refuse this because of this and this. And what the executive of the county can say, okay, fine. Then what that means, we might miss this service. And farmers, and they are the owners. They can say, fine, we are okay with that. So to summarize, there is need for either a body like SOCA to helping summarize some of these and make sure that there's implication. I was impressed for the way for the BBI was even summarized. I wish we can have a similar in enthusiasm in like summarizing some of these laws and policies that impact our farmers, to make sure that the farmers, smallholders, businesses, they understand. But at the moment, as we stand, none. The way they are, it's just a finance bill, and people are not able to understand. So there's a gap or an opportunity to ensure that information is available. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Henry. I'll get back to you, Geoffrey, as I just mentioned one question to Lydia, maybe the final one before we wrap up the session. So Lydia, maybe as Geoffrey is going to speak, just think about how do we utilize our political economy in our favor, especially in agriculture. So I'll give Geoffrey the platform, and then Lydia can take the last question. Geoffrey.
Thank you. Mine is just a small comment, really, regarding the policy policy brief. I just wanted to mention that for purposes of our information, yes, there's a gap. However, it's not absolute zero. There's an agency called KIPRA, Kenya Institute for Public Policy Research and Analysis. So they normally do periodicals and policy briefs and even studies. Right now, I know they're working on a study on the feasibility or viability of the Kenya-US. May not be published immediately because it has to be, approved at higher levels. But I know they do some work. So members can take advantage of their website. You can always get something. And also from the NGOs world, look at the website for Institute of Economic Affairs. They also do some studies. Yes, so thank you. That's what I just wanted to mention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Geoffrey, for that. So Lydia, on to the question, how do we utilize our political economy to favor our businesses as agriculturists? How do we utilize that? And maybe just on the same, tying in, how do we ensure that such studies by KIPRA are made public and without necessarily having to be approved at that higher level? Because a study is a study. These are researchers, they know their work, they know what they are studying, they know what they are researching, they know the questions they are asking. How do we ensure that this information is out there in the public? Thank you. Lydia? Is Lydia still online? Maybe she's dropped off. Okay, unfortunately, she has dropped off. Maybe any of the panelists can take the questions. I don't know if she's back. Okay, she's back. So Lydia, maybe one more question for you. How do we utilize the political economy to favor us in the agricultural sector? And also, there's something that Geoffrey has raised about KIPRA that does research and publishes the policy briefs. But then again, when the research is done, it has to be approved first before publishing. How do we get this information just the way it is? If this is the truth and this is how it should be, how do we get this information out there to the public? Do we make KIPRA independent, or how do we operate? So Lydia.
Hi, Nekesa. I hope I caught everything. My internet is a bit ish. So I believe that we still need to have KIPRA as a government agency. What we need to have, on the other hand, is strong private sector institutions, because what we need is to have objective policy reform and creating an enabling environment that is objectively informed. So if KIPRA has been tasked with that mandate by government, then it is upon the private sector to get organized to ensure that the advocacy processes of the private sector are backed by data. So I find that to date, that is still one of the weakest points of the private sector. Data is still very, very limited, and this is evidenced even by a forum that was happening today, the CADAP biennial review process. So one of the key gaps that was cited was there is the scanty data coming from the private sector. So one of the things that going forward we need to really strengthen is that aspect of conducting evidence, as in evidence-based policy, as in advocacy processes. And for smallholder farmers, again, I will go back that they need to be organized, because again, engaging them on an individual basis, the administration costs are very prohibitive. But perhaps if they are organized into cooperatives, the likes of Githunguri dairies and others, then it becomes very easy for them to employ someone who understands these kinds of things. And then when they become members of lobby groups like the likes of KAM, KEPSA, KNCCI, when submissions are called for, then we are able to get the positions of these farmers through the technical experts that they have employed at these cooperatives. So that would be my position, that private sector needs to step up and also provide objective evidence as we engage on the policy reform process.
Thank you, Lydia. There's one more comment from Francis Kimeria, and he says he's listened to Mr. Odero talking about the standards that need to be met. That's the market compliance requirements that are required when we are exporting. But what about our local market? What is being done? Maybe one of you can take up the question and even give us the status of the case 1758. Maybe it's an opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Francis. May I go first?
Yes,
Yeah.
please, Geoffrey. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Francis Gitonga. That's a very valid question, actually a very valid concern. And where we see it has been an issue, Lydia will tell you, we've talked about this over and over again at the National SPS Committee, that we tend to focus more on what is going outside and paying little attention to what we are consuming. Now, ideally, food safety should be a function of the Ministry of Health. And by devolution, not even by devolution, but in specificity, so specifically the aspect of market surveillance, it's supposed to be done today, given the devolution, by the county government, the public health departments of the county governments. So the question emerges, do they have the capacity to do that? That is one. So Ministry of Health, in a number of times, normally delegate some of these duties to the Kenya Bureau of Standards. And honestly, all of my life, I've never met KEBS people in our markets. Never. I've never been had anywhere that KEBS people or even KEFIS people or AFA have come to a market and they've tested tomatoes and they found that the chemical residues are above normal. So this is an issue that we need to take up both as government and private sector. So these mandates need to be taken up seriously. Issues to do with food safety regulations have been dragging in Parliament and in our offices since 2012 because of the politics in various ministries. And are we being recorded live on Facebook or anywhere? Can you comment before I make my next statement?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll withhold that statement.
I hear you.
But yes, there are legal issues, there are legal challenges. We have not been able to finalize the act since 2012 because of, lack of consensus between two significant ministries in the country that deal with food safety issues. So yes, that is a concern, and we hope we'll have it addressed soon. In the meantime, as a consumer, kindly take charge, and once in a while, as private sector, sometimes you hold a bigger power. You can speak to power, you can speak to the president. I cannot, he's my boss. I love to be as polite as possible. And even then, whatever I write will have to pass through 11 stages before it reaches him. By the time it reaches him, it may not be my message. Okay? So, private sector, when you have an opportunity to speak with the high-level policymakers, this is an issue that we need to continue raising because it's actually affecting human health. Thank you. Thank you, Francis, for your concern. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll have to wind up. We are six minutes into 8:30. We are well above our time. So I'll just give less than 30 seconds for each of the panelists to just make a final remark about what's the way forward. Give us a way forward. Maybe not, it could be for now, short term or mid-term or long term. So you can just give us a wrap-up statement.
If I go first, this is Henry Kenya. If I go first, I'll say, guys, people, whether farmers or even for us as their representatives, let's stay woke. Let's stay woke. And that's what is there. Let's simplify it for the benefit of our industry. Thank you.
Geoffrey, then Lydia.
I'll say as a way forward, let's continue engaging in this kind of fora, and also to take action when we get the chance. Public participation, let's be there. Thank you.
I just wish to appreciate SOCA for embarking on public-private partnership, as is witnessed from today's webinar. And I think they have broken ground and set the pace for the rest of the private sector, that these kinds of collaborations are going to actually address a lot of information gaps that we've been having. And then finally for Mr. Kimeria, maybe we will pick this up later, but there's actually something being done for the local market, and that is with the rollout of the code of practice or the fresh fruits and vegetables. So all is not lost. We have started to make inroads, and it will require a lot of goodwill even from the private sector, especially in aspects of self-regulation for these kinds of public-private partnerships to succeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Geoffrey, Henry, and Lydia. It was really an informative session, and we hope to take this up to another level next week on Thursday and discuss more about this, just to enable those in agribusiness get into better agribusiness practices and to be able to produce safe and quality food for the masses. And as you've heard, private sector, I don't know how many times it has been mentioned, but we as private sector, those in private sector have a very big burden, or they have a big burden on their shoulders, and also a huge role to play in terms of pushing for some of these policies and ensuring that we are getting the right, policies out there, the right levies for our farmers. If it's removal or if it is adding, we need to know what to balance. How do we strike the balance between the two? At the same time, let's ensure that those who sit in terms of decision making are the right people, so that we can be able to have impact on our economy and also on the type of businesses that we do. I would like to thank you from wherever you are. Good morning, good evening, and good night.